Hello everybody, my name is Michaela Schaefer and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about radiated tortoises, Astrachilles radiata, and I am a MS student here at West Liberty University and I am a second semester student. So let's get right into it. So first, the diagnosis. So radiated tortoises are called radiated tortoises because of their shell pattern. It kind of looks like a radiated sun radiating out on their shell. And again, these guys are tortoises, not turtles. These guys are at the zoo I'm at, and I take care of them. The picture there is Reiko, and he is our resident radiated tortoise, and as I'm cleaning their yard, so many guests walk by and they're like, oh my gosh, look at the turtle, and I have to correct them and say, hey guys, this is Reiko, he's actually not a turtle, he's a tortoise. And then I explain to them the differences, and I'm hoping you guys do know the difference because you guys are master students, but just in case you don't, tortoises are more land-dwelling animals. So their feet are more kind of like tree trunks instead of like flippers like turtles are. These guys can get shell lengths up to 35 inches and weigh up to 35 pounds once they're fully grown. And they can live 50 to 150 years. We actually don't know the exact number because we haven't been studying them for that long and we don't have a lot of records. So a lot of these are guesstimations due to shell length, but hopefully we can get some more accurate data with the tests and studies that are going on currently. And these guys are definitely a K-selected species because they do not reach sexual maturity until they are 15 to 25 years old, which is a very long time for these guys. According to the IUCN Red List, they're considered critically endangered, which is the very far end of the spectrum, and we will be talking about why they are critically endangered later in the PowerPoint. And they actually are on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife ranking scale, and they're considered endangered, and they were actually placed on that list in 1970, so they've been on that list for a little while. And this is because they are so heavily traded. So because they are on the wildlife list, people are required to have permitting to transport them across state lines and other places. So private breeders, other things like that, will have to have permits or be an AZA accredited institution to be able to house these individuals. I also put that they are on the CITES Appendix 1, so this bans the movement of any tortoises from Madagascar to a country where they do not exist. So transporting the tortoises, let's say, from Madagascar to the US is strictly prohibited. And they are also a AZA safe species, which we will be talking about a little bit later. All right, so for taxonomy, they are in class Reptilia, because they are reptiles, order Testudines, and family Testudinidae. And again, we have a picture of Reiko, the radiated tortoise. All right, so a little bit more taxonomy. So when it comes to the genus and the species, it can be a little bit more challenging because in the literature there have been 3 names that have been used. The first one was dubbed by Shaw in 1802 when the species was first classified. And then after that we got Geochelone radiata, and Geochelone is more of a catch-all clade, because when you look at that clade, there are tortoises from Madagascar, Africa, South America, and Asia. So they really wanted to get more specific with the classification of this tortoise. So Astrachilles radiata is the current classification that we use, and this was most recently in the Turtles of the World checklist in 2021. And there are 2 species in this genus. There's Astrachilles radiata, and then there's also Astrachilles nymphera, which is the Plowshire tortoise, which also is located in Madagascar. So Astrachilles is a specific genus that is only found in Madagascar. And here are 2 phylogenies that I found. These 2 were from 2006. I could not find a published, updated one with the new Astrachilles radiata, but I thought I would show you guys this one. And as you can see to the phylogeny of the left, I have in the red box circled both species of tortoises, and this one specific phylogeny is the relationship based on 57 morphological characters that they were looking at. And you can see that those 2 species of tortoises were very similarly related in the tree. And then when you look to the right, you see that this one is a tree that has maximum parsimony. So maximum parsimony is the least amount of steps, evolutionary steps, that someone can take to get to a given species. So this study was looking at the genetic similarities between all the Geochelone species. So you can see that Geochelone radiata is in the Madagascar tab, and same as Geochelone nymphora. Sorry, I'm totally butchering these scientific names. So for those of you who don't know where Madagascar is, this is just from Google Maps. So here is Africa, and then Madagascar is that little island off of the southeastern coast. And then when you look at Madagascar specifically, radiated tortoises are found in this southern region. Here is another photo showing more of the current range of radiated tortoises and how it has significantly decreased. So you can see with the dotted line there, the range in 1865 was a lot bigger than what the range was taken in 2000, which is that darker gray. This study was done to try to determine the density of individuals between 14 study sites. And in this study, they found that the mean density of tortoises in some of those transects was around 2,522 tortoises per square kilometer, which is a lot more than what it was in 1995 when Lewis did another study, and he only found that there was 643 tortoises per square kilometer. But don't let those numbers fool you, because those numbers can significantly decline in one day if some poachers or collectors come and collect 1,000 tortoises. Then that number is obviously skewed. So keep that in mind with those numbers I just told you. Here is another photo from another study that was done in 2005. In that study, they were also looking at different transects, but they were looking for mostly genetic data. So they were taking genetic data from all those different study sites listed there with numbers, just to see if there were any different genetic differences, how genetically different the populations were. And they found they were looking at the ND4 gene in those tortoises, and they found that there were only 2 haplotypes. And one of the haplotypes was only found in one of the survey areas. So that is telling us that all the tortoises are very genetically similar. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the habitat these guys are found in. These guys are found in the spiny forest ecoregion. So this is mostly dominated by these 2 species of plants, Dicharacia and Euphorbia plants, and those are going to be the ones pictured there below the tortoises. They are going to be big, spiny plants that you would see in a more deserty ecosystem that doesn't receive a lot of rain. So again, spiny, bushy plants is the name of the game in this region, because in this region they do not get a lot of rainfall in a lot of the months. They have some wet summer months, but most of the year it is going to be dry. And in this region specifically, 90% of the floral species are found. And in the past decade, actually, there has been a shift in the types of plants that we have been seeing in this region due to climate change. So a lot of the plants we were seeing in abundance were a lot of different grasses, deserty bushes, more savanna-like plants. But now a lot of those plants are going extinct or getting extirpated because the climate conditions have been changing, and also people have been bringing in invasive species that take over what the local species are. So that's something we have to look out for. And the tortoises spend most of their times in that underbrush thicket, eating all of those grasses that are in that area. With this picture, there was a study that was done in 2016 to identify how climate change has been affecting all the different ecosystems in Madagascar. So as you look, there are 2 things that are underlined in red, and then there's an area that I circled, which is where the radiated tortoises are located. The darker color is the spiny forest habitat that has not been affected. Then the lighter color is the ones that have been affected. And as you can see, it's about 50-50 in what has been affected and what hasn't. And that is due to many things. Climate change is one of them. And it can also be people living on that landscape as well, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. So diet for these guys, it's pretty straightforward. These guys are grazers. That makes 80 to 90% of their diet just grazing on all different kinds of grasses and plant matter that's on their level on the ground. They also eat succulents. So as you can see, they are chowing down on some lovely cactus pads there. And those are tortoises that are in an AZA zoo in the Honolulu Zoo, and they got some of those cactus pads as a part of their diet. Our tortoises at our zoo, they eat a mixture of tortoise pellets, and then they also have a salad that has lettuce and lots of different fruits and vegetables to make sure they are getting their proper nutrition. And then again, fruits, and they get most of their water from their food sources that they intake. Because they do live in more of a deserty environment, there is not going to be water readily available. So that is one of their adaptations that they have, is to get the necessary water that they need from their food sources. But during the rainy seasons, they can definitely be seen drinking out of puddles of water. So on to our fun facts. Fun fact number 1, they are locally known as soke, which is the Malagasy word for radiated tortoise. And as you can see, I pulled a picture there from the Turtle Conservation Agency of some children looking after a radiated tortoise around where they are living. All right, so fun fact number 2, you can tell the difference between males and females because of their tail length and also the shape of their plastron. Normally, males will have a longer tail than females, but also you can look in the picture and the male is on the left and the female is on the right. And when you look at the opening near the plastron and the carapace, the cavity is a little bit more concave, so it caves in on the male than it does on the female. And those are really the only ways you can tell males and females apart, other than doing genetic testing. But when you're in the field, you do not have that luxury, so you're going to use these points of reference to determine if they're male or female. And fun fact number 3, I couldn't talk about tortoises and not talk about tortoise sex. So females tortoises can lay 3 to 12 eggs in one clutch, but those eggs can take 5 to 8 months to hatch, which is a pretty long time. And then obviously how they do the thing is males mount the females and then basically smash the plastron near the female's genital area, and that's when they make those classic, lovely tortoise sex noises that we all know and love. And there is a picture of 2 radiated tortoises having a wonderful time. And now we're going to go right into talking about means of impairment. And the biggest driver for their impairment is the illegal harvesting and trade of the species in Madagascar for bushmeat, and then out of Madagascar for the pet trade. It is estimated 45,000 adult radiated tortoises are harvested each year for bushmeat or for the pet trade. And in all the individuals that are getting harvested, we are seeing them harvesting more females than males. And this may be due to a few reasons, but the reasons they mentioned in the article were people preferring the taste of female meat over male meat, because females are more fatty than males, so it just tastes better. So that's why they're taking the females over the males. And in commercial harvesting, it is reported that these harvesters can travel up to 200 kilometers to get to where these tortoises are. So they're willing to travel any distance, because for some people, this is one of their only means of money or income, is getting these tortoises. And tortoises are either absent or very low in sites that are commercially harvested, but more remote, unharvested sites that are way out from any civilization can be up to densities of 2,500 individuals per kilometer. But in those regions where they are harvested, it is very, very minimal. And in the regions where these tortoises are found, there are 4 different tribes. The Antadroya and the Mahafala respect the tortoises. They think it is very taboo if they were to remove or disrupt the tortoises in any way, because it has been a part of their culture to respect these tortoises. But in the other two tribes, the Vezo and the Antosoi communities, they use them as meat. And you can see that when you look at a map of populations of tortoises, where those two tribes are that use them as meat, there's not a lot of tortoises in those areas because they are getting consumed rather quickly. And like I said, these people rely on these tortoises for food, for money, for everything as their source of income. Because tortoises can go up to, I was seeing, $4,500 on the black market for one tortoise, which is a lot of money to these Malagasy people. One of the reasons why these tortoises can get upwards to that much, $4,500 per individual, is because we have deemed them to be critically endangered. If we haven't deemed them to be critically endangered, then they wouldn't be such a hot item on the black market. So this can be somewhat controlled by us too, because we have deemed them to be this critically endangered species, and because they are so critically endangered, everybody wants a piece of them. And because of that, the prices skyrocket and make it such a profitable business for a lot of these black market buyers. So we have to think about that side of the coin too. And another major mean of impairment for the species is habitat loss. So as you saw when I was showing the pictures of the range of the radiated tortoise, it has drastically shrunken over the past 25 years by 1/5, which is very significant. And this is due to many different things, but some of the major things are agriculture and people using the timber for coal production. So they have been using different slash and burn techniques to clear pastures for them for their cattle, and they've been using all the wood from the trees to fire their houses, keep themselves warm, and using them to help produce coal. And because their habitat has been shrinking so significantly, there has been low genetic variability between the different populations that have been studied over multiple studies. And they have found that when tortoises are closer to cities, their abundance is lower. So they're only finding, 1.8 tortoises per kilometer, compared to when you move further away from cities that are in unharvested sites and undisturbed habitat. They can find 32 individuals per square kilometer, which is a lot more than when they're closer to cities. And guess what? When they're closer to cities, that means they are more easily accessible for those different harvesters and poachers to get those tortoises as well. And this picture, I thought, was great. It shows habitat degradation all across Madagascar. So as you can see, in that southern region where the tortoises are is where we're seeing the most change. To the furthest left is climate adjustment. So you can see the climate is drastically changing in that area. As well as if you go to the right, the loss of habitat in areas right where the tortoises are. So more people are coming to those areas, and then that means that the tortoises are losing habitat because people are cutting down trees and burning pastures so they can have their livestock, and then they can have something for themselves to burn to make coal. So these are all different factors that lead to the radiated tortoise's decline. Another thing that is a mean of impairment for this species is livestock and farming, like I said, because they have been clearing forests and pastures for their livestock, and also invasive species. So there has been an invasive species that has been introduced to that area. It's a species of prickly pear, and it is due to its nutritional value that it has been brought to that area because it's good nutrition for the livestock and is good nutrition for the people that are around because they can prepare it in different dishes because it has a lot of water and good nutrition. But it is not really good for the radiated tortoises because their bodies aren't adapted to consuming plants that are that high in moisture and nutritional value. So as a result, you can see that they have had some disformities because they're not used to getting the nutrition that they're getting from the prickly pear plants. So here is a photo of a tortoise that has been eating that prickly pear plant, and there has been some pyramiding and shell deformities that we could see. And there's also been red staining around the mouth parts, so that's one of the reasons how we know that this individual has been constantly eating prickly pear plants, because the fruiting body is kind of that pinkish color and that will stain their face. And because the prickly pear plant has different nutritional values than they're used to, these deformities usually come from that difference in nutrition. So an example is in the excess of protein and low calcium and phosphorus ratios can result in these sort of shell deformities. And this can also result in skeletal deformities and kidney failure because low calcium is really bad because our bones are made of calcium. So eating this plant is not going to be sustainable for them in the long run. All right, so now we're going to talk about population viability. So we're going to talk about in situ first. So what we are doing in zoos and aquariums and other facilities to help keep these guys on track. So these guys are an AZA safe species, which is saving animals from extinction. So it just gives them that designation to tell people like, hey, this animal is severely imperiled and we need to do something about it. So there has been a lot of funding from different organizations to help with the tortoises' conservation action. So in AZA facilities, there are 338 individuals living at 63 different AZA institutions, and they are considered a green SSP species, which is very good. And that means that their genetic diversity is around 97%. So we have a very genetically diverse population in human care right now. And these guys have been seen to do very well in different mixed species exhibits. They have seen being exhibited with different lemur species to do a Madagascar mixed species exhibit. So they can talk about how these guys are a flagship species to help not only conserve tortoise populations, but also all the other biodiverse wildlife that lives on the island of Madagascar. And these guys are super great ambassador animals. You can see that in the photo, there is a trainer there, target training a radiated tortoise, and this is a really good opportunity for us to show people and educate them about how endangered radiated tortoises are. But not just that, it's also how smart these guys are and how trainable tortoises can be. So getting the public more aware about the species and then the capability of the species as well is super cool. So population viability et situ is not as good as we were looking with populations that are housed in AZA facilities. So according to recent studies and habitat viability assessments in Madagascar, they are seeing that extinction will be likely within 50 years. And that is mainly due to the exportation and bushmeat trade of this species, because their numbers have been great in the wild, but one, trip from a poacher or a collector can send this species to extinction, and that's the point where we're looking right now. Harvesters will need to reduce by 85% or more to be able to kind of bounce back from the road we are going on. And no more than 9,000 radiated tortoises can be taken from the wild. But in big, larger spectrum, it is estimated that 45,000 adults are being harvested each year. So it's going to have to take a lot from the Malagasy government and other countries to crack down on the illegal trade of this species, because they are on the CITES Appendix 1. So it is technically illegal to trade these species, but somehow they're still doing it, and they're still doing it very well, and the laws that we are putting in place are not doing anything. So we need to really crack down on those laws and try to limit how many tortoises are being taken out of the wild. And because so many individuals are being taken out of the wild, there's little genetic variability in the populations. So that can be another issue we can see. We can see a genetic bottleneck with the species, and then we can see genetic malformations and other things. So we really need to get this species back on track. This is a picture of a study that was done in 2009. And in this study, they wanted to look at an isolated population of tortoises that was located in a national park. And I'm just going to call it PNA because I do not know how to pronounce the park's name. But it is one of the last remaining sanctuaries where tortoises can be located. And this is located near the Vezo and Antisoni communities, which are, like I said, the communities that eat these guys as bushmeat. So they did genetic analysis of 3 different groups, 3 different parcels, as you can see in the little zoomed in photo. And they found that there was really no significant difference in the genetic variation of the populations of tortoises within the park and also outside the park. However, one of the most important findings that was found is the majority of the tortoises that were captured in the national park were relatively small males. So this is indicating that the recruitment is very low in this population. And we found that in the park there was evidence of poachers coming in and removing the larger individuals from the population. So those larger individuals are not getting their genetics back into the population to make it more diverse. So we're going to have that low recruitment value. And like I said before, they're taking the females because they are bigger at some points and they taste better. So that's why we're seeing a lot of males being left behind. One of the first recovery efforts that I want to talk about is the AZA SAFE species, and SAFE stands for Saving Animals from Extinction. So this species is considered a flagship species for the spiny forest ecoregion in Madagascar, but also for the whole entire country, because basically everything on that island is endangered because it's endemic, so it's only found on that island. So it is a flagship for different lemur species, amphibian species, and other reptiles that can be found on the island. And because it's a part of the SAFE program, it does have an SSP and breeding program like I was talking about. And it is a SSP green species because it will retain that genetic viability for the next 100 years. And these guys can actually be found in 63 AZA institutions, but when looking at funding for different field conservation efforts, 8 AZA facilities have donated upwards of $196,000 to the field for conservation efforts. And having these tortoises in zoos allows us to use them for educational programs, for, taking them to schools and educating kids about how important these tortoises are to the ecosystem. But also, AZA can support conservation efforts that are in Madagascar. And one of the efforts that I saw that was really cool was Soccer for Sulca. And that the word sulca is Malagasy for radiated tortoise. So what AZA did was they funded basically a soccer tournament for all these different Malagasy kids. And they came together and AZA funded their uniforms, coaching, soccer nets, soccer balls, everything for them. And each team had to pick a different animal that was endangered in Madagascar. So you can see in that top left-hand corner, those people chose the radiated tortoises as their mascot. So they all got to choose a different endangered species to be their mascot, and they got education on why these different species were so important to the environment. And then they actually played in this soccer tournament, and hundreds of people came to watch these kids play soccer because they were so passionate about this conservation effort and why it was so important for everyone to learn about these different species. Another recovery effort is the Turtle Survival Alliance, or TSA, and they actually have a tortoise conservation center in southern Madagascar, specifically for radiated tortoises. At that specific center in Madagascar, it is home to 9,000 radiated tortoises, and those radiated tortoises are ones that have been confiscated by the government, by people trying to smuggle them out for the black market. And this is only one conservation center. There are multiple conservation centers all across the country of Madagascar, and they are caring for over 18,000 total tortoises. And one of the things that just recently happened, if I draw your attention to that middle picture with the guy holding up the tortoise, and you can see that it actually has a little tracker on it, and that is radio telemetry. So for the first time, we are putting radio telemetry on these tortoises and re-releasing them back out into the wild so we can track what kinds of environments they are utilizing, so we can further protect those crucial environments so the populations can again thrive like they used to. And if you would like more information on that, I found these pictures on the TSA's Instagram. And another cute one that I found was in that top right corner. That is actually a beer that was produced by the TSA to support turtle conservation. So there are multiple different things that this organization is doing to try to promote tortoise conservation in Madagascar. And another conservation recovery effort that is really dear to my heart, it is a organization called Conservation Fusion, and I actually got the opportunity to meet Susie, who is pictured in that bottom right-hand corner painting with those kids at a conference, and she is a wonderful person. And this recovery effort focuses on educating the public, and not in Madagascar, but not just the adults, but the kids. So what Susie does is she travels to Madagascar, and she travels to all different schools all over the country, and she goes in and she educates the kids about the importance of animals and conservation in Madagascar especially, because when you think about it, these kids do not know how special they are to live in such a unique environment, because they don't have the resources like we do. A lot of them don't have internet, they don't have running water. So we need to go and educate these kids about how important it is for them to conserve all of these animals that they basically live with. And you can see in that bottom picture, they are doing arts and crafts, and they are painting on little rocks to make little radiated tortoises. So the kids are learning about animal conservation, but also they educate them on not just animals, but right now she's down there and she posted on Facebook that she is teaching them about weather and cyclones and the different ecology that is specifically in that area of Madagascar, which is super interesting and cool, because if we are not educating the kids and the public about how important the conservation of these species are, then we're not going to get anywhere with conservation, because we can't always be there to monitor the tortoises and watch for illegal harvesters taking the tortoises. We have to educate the local people to watch for these certain things and report back to us on what they're seeing. So educating the youth in the community is super important in these sorts of situations. So for my slogan, it's not really original, but it's called Save the Selke, which is, as you know, Malagasy for radiated tortoise. And then I had to put two pictures of my boy, Reiko, who is our resident radiated tortoise at the Bavard Zoo. And I wanted to tell you guys that Reiko says hi. So thank you guys for listening to my presentation, and have a great day, evening, night, whenever you are listening to this presentation. Thanks.